Okay, so just take a drink. Okay, so let's start by setting up our folder structure now. So if I go to my desktop, you can see all my desktop stuff. We're not too worried about it. I'm just gonna make a new folder and call this stream build. Now you can call this whatever you want to call it. But I'm calling it stream build because this is the title that makes the most sense to me. Because I will be building this on stream and on YouTube video to help you learn how to code web applications. So I call it stream build. So now if I go inside of it, you can see it's an empty folder. So we're going to start using terminal now, actually. So if we go to File and Open Folder, you want to go to your desktop or wherever you put the folder. I would recommend just leaving it on your desktop, clicking on your folder that you want to make files in and select the folder. So you can see the welcome window is gone. It adds a new one. But we're now in stream build. You can see right here that we're in stream build. So we can make files in one of two or three ways. The first one is right-clicking in your physical folder, new and folder, and that's how you can make folders. Now, you can see that when we do new, we don't actually have the option to make the file types that we want, which are HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So how do we do that? Well, we can make a folder. Maybe we want to make the folder in here named CSS, and maybe we want to make it a JavaScript folder. You can see that it's now updated in VS Code, but we can't make the file type that we want. We now want to make an HTML file. We can't do that in here. So we have one of two ways. We can right-click in Stream Build area and do new file and make an index.html file, or we can use our terminal and we can use a command called touch. And what touch does, it says make something, make whatever this person is going to input into the terminal. Whatever you're going to type next is what that file is, or file is going to be. So I could call it test, and it's going to make something called test. It doesn't have a file extension though, so it's not going to do anything. I can type in it, I can save it, but nothing's going to come from it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So, well, what kind of file do we need to make? We know we need to make an HTML file. So we need to worry about two things. The name of the file that we're going to make. I don't know why test is still in here, because I accidentally deleted the JavaScript folder. We need to know the file type that we're going to make, and we need to know what we're going to name it before we actually make it, obviously. So in this case, we want a file that when our website is loaded up, it always goes to that page. It's considered our home page. So it's not really called home. It's not called home in whatever our extension is. It's called index. And the reason we call it index is because this is how Google defines what a home page is and where you need to be sent to right off the bat. If you go to Google and I search for, let me just think of something to search real quick. Let me search my school. So I search Fanshawe Online. You can see that there's continuing education and online tools and myfanshawe.ca. But what I Googled is Fanshawe Online. Now, not only is it cached, that doesn't matter. This is the first option because this is what would be considered their index page. This is the page that is always going to be defaulted to. And it's fanshawe.ca. This is considered their home page. Therefore, it's the index. So, we know that we need to name our file index because that's how Google is going to say, this is the home page. Whenever someone searches for something related to your website, I'm going to send them to this page if they don't specifically search for the About page. So what kind of file do we actually need? Well, we need a file that loads loads on the web, that actually works on the internet. Now, the internet has gotten much more complicated over the years, so you can actually load a lot more than just HTML now. Off the top of my head, I can't really remember a lot that it loads, but you can load a ton of files now. But for the sake of what we're doing, we're making we're making website applications. So we want a dot to signify that we're done with the name, and now we're ready to move on to the file type. So we want to do an HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Link. And what this does is it says to the internet, and it says to our whatever browser you're choosing to use, that this is a website. This is a website application that we want to load using this normal standard file type for the internet. When you see things like HTTP or HTTPS, if I just go ahead and take this and copy this in, you can see HTTPS. This is means that this is an HTML file. HTTPS is for protocol. The S is secure. But HTTP means that this is an HTML document type that we're loading. So we want HTML. So if we hit enter, you can see that our index.html has now been loaded in. You can see the little icon. So if I were to, again, do test, you can see that this icon is text. It's kind of like a bunch of bars. It's to signify that I can only really type in this. Nothing can happen from it. But with HTML, we can do things that a normal text file or a CSS file or JavaScript file can't do. JavaScript can do it, CSS can do it to an extent, but index.html is our home page. So we notice that there's nothing actually in here. Now, with Visual Studio Code and with Emmet, we can make something pop in really quickly by using a shorthand. We want to specifically work on HTML-oriented code, nothing else. So with that, we're not going to have, if you've used other programming languages before, such as like Python or C++ or C#, it's going to look like a different, the syntax is what it's called. It's like how we write the code is going to look much different. It's because we're specifically writing in HTML. So if I make an exclamation point, you can see that these are two Emmet abbreviations. One of them is 3 exclamation points, and you can see that I make something called the doc type HTML. That's great. That's what we want to start with. But maybe we don't want to type out, maybe we can type out even less and make this a lot quicker. So what about the first exclamation point? What about just one? Okay, well, let's see what it does. Now you can tell by either pressing enter, hitting tab, or left clicking on the option. I will hit tab. Now we can see that we start off with the doc type HTML still. That's great. We're now defining that this document file is an HTML file. It's a hypertext markup link file. And that's exactly what we want. We want to tell the internet this is a website. Okay, so let's break down everything else then. So HTML, we understand that this is a tag, that this is what the website reads it as, or what the internet reads our application as. So what's this? What's this thing here? This lang equals en. This is a tag. Now all of these are tags, but this is specifically a selector, or I like to just call them tags. Or an element. Yeah, I guess you could call it an element. So lang is short form for language. So you can hover over this blue lang text and see what this is doing. It helps define the language of an element. Language is non-editable in elements, should be written by the user. So when we write our code, we want it to be English. So how do we define it as English? Well, we just put en. The quotes are so that we wrap everything in quotes like this, so we're not breaking our website, and we're defining what something is. Maybe I want it in French. I don't want it in French, but maybe I want it in French. I put it in the quotes so that language is now defined as French. So we wrap stuff in quotes as a definition. So what we're doing here is we're telling anything in the HTML, anything in our file, anything that's loaded by the internet, it's going to be English language. So let's move on. We have some new tags here. We have a head tag. And in this case, not only do we have a head tag, we have a second head tag. And it's got a line in front of it. So this line is here to signify we're done with this tag. We want to load stuff inside of it, but it ends here. This tag, this head tag with no line, is saying we want to start here. We want to start loading stuff in specifically here. Maybe we want to load stuff inside of it, and then we want to close it specifically here, so that it doesn't interfere with anything above or below it. So that's how opening and closing tags work. So we open a tag, in this case we're opening head, and we're closing it with stuff inside of it so that it doesn't affect above or below it. So it is a head tag. So you can see it represents a collection of metadata for the document. The metadata is data that isn't, it's loaded in by your server or the internet, but it's not actually displayed on the page with the exception of a title. Now metadata, the meta element represents various kinds of metadata that cannot be expressed using the title, base, link, style, and script. So that means that this stuff, while it exists and is doing something, it's not going to be defined specifically by our website. It's not going to display. You're not going to see at the top of your page meta character set UTF-8. You're not going to see meta with the name of viewport content view equals width device dash width, whatever. Yeah, I have my chat open. I do. So if you have any questions, then just go ahead and ask. So we have our meta tags that aren't loaded in, but they're still incredibly crucial to the internet as a whole. Meta tags are how you get a lot more search results. Meta tags are how you define specific character sets and how you're going to load in data. This meta tag, for example, is saying, let our website scale. That touch test won't work for me. Oh, okay. So, and this is my bad because I didn't run it over. So, with loading up Visual Studio Code for the first time, what's actually probably likely is you're seeing PowerShell. This is Windows's version of command line. Now you're either going to see PowerShell or you're going to see command prompt, in which case you would see CMD. If you see PowerShell, the way files work is completely different because PowerShell sucks. So we want to actually change it from PowerShell to maybe something like CMD. Now let's see if CMD works, just as an example. Touch is not a recognizable or external bat. Okay, so let's actually set up something else for our environment. Let's set up something called Git Bash. Now I've run through this before. Git Bash is it's effectively a Mac terminal for Windows. It allows us to do Mac OS built-in command line options. Now, we want this because it's much easier to work with Mac's command line, surprisingly, rather than Windows. So if we go to gitforwindows.org and we download this option, this is really good as well because my download speed is really bad right now. This is really great as well because we'll need Git for linking up GitHub at a later date. So while this installs, I'm just going to take a drink because my throat is dry. So you can see what tools are featured here with Git. We have Git Bash, which provides a bash or terminal emulation that behaves just like Linux and Unix, but it works the same as Mac. The GUI, we don't worry about that in the shell integration. So launch it up and let it install on your computer. So we want to hit next, and you would just want to let it install. I'm not going to reinstall it. I think there is something that you need to do though. Let me actually reinstall it, as much as I don't want to. Okay, so let's install Git 2.26.0. So it's going to install into your program files. And once this is done being super slow, so what this is obviously doing is installing Git, and again, Git is necessary for things like GitHub, and GitHub allows us to create what are called repositories and store all of our project information. So all of our folders, all of our files, maybe all of our images, anything that we change or add or update, GitHub stores it for us. So once that's done installing, you'll get to go to this page. We don't care about this page though. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. Now, to make sure that you have Git installed, just look for Git Bash. You'll see the Git icon and you'll see the app. You can open it if you want, but we're not going to. Or I'm not going to. So we're back on our page. We have our index.html. We don't have our index.html actually because we didn't touch it in. So you're either currently set to CMD or PowerShell. Now, the way you change these are you would click on this button where it says 1 for CMD or PowerShell, and you select your default shell. Now, what this is doing is you're now choosing which type of command prompt you want to use, whether you want to use the Windows version, which is all right, whether you want to use PowerShell, which is dated and useless unless you're using Cobalt or like bank management systems, or we use Git Bash, which is exactly what we want. And once you install Git Bash, you'll see it here. So we want to change our default shell to Git Bash. Once we click the plus for a new terminal, we now see that Git Bash is here. You can see your username, mingw64, and the folder, that file structure. If you're seeing this, then great. If not, make sure that you do have Git Bash installed, and maybe we run it like this. So it's possible that you might have to log in to Git. I don't remember. I don't think you have to log in. I think it should just pull up. It has been a very long time since I've set up Git. So if you see this window and you can type in it and it's all good, we want to go to our desktop. So how will we get to our desktop? Well, we use CD. Now, CD I don't know the term for, but it's just saying, let's get ready to move to a different part of your computer. So in this case, we can see that we're already on my desktop. So maybe I'm starting in users, just say, or maybe I'm starting in my root folder. I'm in my C drive. Well, I want to get to my specific name. I want to very specifically get to my tab. So let's now look at our actual folder structure. So we were just in our C drive, our local disk. So now we're in users. Well, I need to look for my user. In this case, mine's Champ because it's my Hotmail thing that I set as a kid. So I now need to go into Champ. Well, I'm here now. I'm in Champ. I'm in my specific user. But we're not fully where we need to be yet to access our folder. So where do we need to go next? Well, we know that our folder is on our desktop or wherever you put it. So looking through this list, I can see that I have all these random folders: VirtualBox, Hello World, OneDrive, Postman, a bunch of images, videos. But I have one specific one called desktop. So I know that that's where my folder is. So I need to go to my desktop. Or you can do capital. It doesn't really matter. Now that I'm on my desktop, as long as I remember the name of my folder, I can continue to use the cd method to get into that folder. So I know that it's stream build, so I will cd into that, and now I'm into this folder. Now, if your terminal wasn't working, we have Git Bash installed, we can just use that touch command in here. It'll still update in VS Code with this index.html. This is because the way this terminal works, or the way Visual Studio Code's terminal works, is that it's just using this as its base. It's just saying, well, just open, instead of doing all those CD steps with the desktop, with stream build, let's just automatically start in whatever I have loaded up in my VS Code. In this case, it's stream build. So we can, if we're stuck on a specific folder that isn't where we want to be originally, we would do cd ... and this says to go back, just step back a folder. So in this list of slashes, we want to step back one slash. So we're in stream build, so let's step back to before this slash, if I can copy it. This slash, in this case, will now be on our desktop. We don't want to be on our desktop though. So we can navigate it through there. Or another option is that, because development has multiple options, we can load up our folder. Maybe I delete my index again. And we can right click, and now we see we have a couple of new options in our right click options. Normally you see new and give access to and all this stuff, but we have Git GUI here and Git Bash here. We don't care about GUI, we care about bashing. So now, all of that CDing that we had to do to get to our stream build folder, it's just done for us. We've loaded up a terminal inside of this folder. And now all we do is just make the file that we want to make. In this case, it's HTML. So if you're ever stuck in here, you've changed over your default shell to Git Bash and you made a new one, but it's just still not working. We have multiple options. We can cd to it from this Git Bash option, or we can right click and Git Bash here and do whatever we need to do. So let's go back to our index file. So again, to pull this all up, I do exclamation point and either hit enter, left click, or tab it. That worked great. Looks good. So it's now that everything's working smoothly for you, then let's run down the HTML again. So we're setting our doc type. Now this doesn't have a close tag because we're setting everything in this file to run as HTML. So we're setting the document type to be HTML. The HTML has an opening and a closing tag because we're defining what we want to load on the page. What we want the internet and our server to see as our hypertext markup link, or hypertext markup language. It's not link, it's language. Hypertext markup language. We want to, anything inside of this will say to our server or to the internet, hey, this is HTML Even though we have our document type set, we want this stuff to specifically be HTML. So we've set our language to English, and we're now on our head tag. So our metadata is loaded here. So our metadata, again, is stuff that isn't generally loaded by onto the page, but is still important for it's hidden important stuff, such as allowing Google to search for your website. So if I go to Google and I look for something called Ask a Toolmaker, now this is a website that I have. You can see I'm the top option at Ask a Toolmaker. Now it's because it's cached. So, or this is a cached version of the website. Ask a Toolmaker pops up here because this is, I have the name, and in my head element, I have the title of Ask a Toolmaker. Now, if I didn't have that, or I didn't have the domain, this wouldn't pop up here. Now, what about if I do spaced out? You can see that I'm now not the top option. And it's because even though I have the domain and even though my title is Ask a Toolmaker, it doesn't matter because my metadata isn't good enough for Google to index it this way. Now you can see that it's filtering for tool and die maker. Now, this is what's called search engine optimization. We're not going to worry about this now, but we're not going to worry about it in depth. But what's happening here is that they've used a specific set of words that align better with what I have searched. Tips for tool and die makers, you will ask them. So they've indexed the specific words, ask a tool maker. And so now you can see that this person will ask is similar to request. So Google is saying, this is a very similar word. Let's look for stuff that has to do with requests as well. Tool and die maker. Well, die's in there, but tool tends to go along with tool and die. So it's indexing. Google is looking for my very specific, or my spaced out search. Now, this is because of metadata. Because what they've done is they've made it easier for Google to find their website and the content in their website. So again, if I go back to specifically Ask Toolmaker, I'm the very first option. The other options are pretty useless. You can see the images that I use on the website. This is not one. This is one, this is one, this is one. This is a placeholder image. This is an image. All these are used. You can see that for some reason my website is tied to an IP with in Houston. This is where the server is. It's network speed and all this stuff. And other hosted domain names. This doesn't matter. We're not really worried about this. We can just tell that with metadata, because of the title and the domain, this is what pulls up. And if I don't specifically search that, I get something different because their metadata is better than mine. So what are these metadatas doing? Well, you can see that we have something called char set equals UTF-8. So we know that brackets, inside of brackets is a definition. We're specifically defining what something is. In this case, we're defining our char set or character set. That's what it actually is. This attribute declares the page's character encoding. It must contain a standard name for character encodings. You're encouraged to use UTF-8. Now, we're not going to get into what character sets are and their encoding methods. UTF-8 is standard across virtually every web platform. It doesn't matter if it's a web application like a website. It doesn't matter if it's a software tool or a game. UTF-8 is how most of the internet encodes your stuff and how it loads your data. And we have multiple other ones. You have UTF-7, which you shouldn't use at all as cross-site scripting. You can use things like Johab and whatever else, but we stick with whatever with UTF-8 because we're making a website. So the next meta tag, of course, meta is data that can't be expressed using title, base, link, style, and script. So this isn't going to load on our page. But the function of this is what we care about. So we're setting a name for this. So this metadata is called, I need to change this song. This is really stupid. This metadata is called viewport. Now, viewport is when you load up Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, Edge, Safari, whatever, your viewport is what you see here. Everything in your browser is considered your viewport. But what's also considered your viewport is how big the page is. So you can see now that my screen is super small. This is now considered a smaller viewport. If I set it to iPhone 5, I'm looking at the viewport of an iPhone 5. I'm looking at, this is what an iPhone 5 might see. Chrome is shipped for it, so we're not going to worry about the responsiveness of it, but we care about, this is an iPhone 5 viewport. This is what is going to be displayed on iPhone 5. So we've called it viewport because we want to target a viewport. Now the content tag is the value of the name. So with content, we're saying, okay, well, we have our viewport. We've selected the viewport. We've selected that person's device and the size of their device. Now we're going to say the width of that device is equal to, or the width of our content is equal to the device's width. So everything on this page, you can see, is now relative to the size of their device. So if I go to, now you can see on iPhone 5, everything is crushed in. This text is a lot smaller. If I go to iPhone 10, it didn't scale very well, but you can see the content size has changed. Now, especially if I go up to a larger screen, the text has gotten bigger. It's now aligned much more differently. The bolding is different. And now maybe I actually size it down like this. And I refresh Google. Okay, Google sucks for it. But let's actually use this GitHub example. You can see that stuff crushes down and in. This is because my viewport is changing. The width of how I'm looking at something is changing and changing and changing. So we're saying, make the width of our HTML, of this file, make it work with the width of whatever the person is looking at it with. So this is obviously laid out much more differently than this. You can see there's more detail here. This line, the latest releases are over on the side now. This is because we're saying we want to make changes with our width, and we want to make it different on different devices. So moving on, initial scale. This is just saying, well, the scale of the website, we're going to start with 100%. No matter what, like with our CSS and with our HTML, we start at 100% and we either go up or down from there. So that maybe so the way you should develop, we're not going to do it, but we're going to, is mobile first. So if I go live, and I'm just going to add some stuff just really quickly. So you can see that this text is loaded in. Now it's bolded because it's a H1, whatever, that doesn't matter. The point is that it's full screen. It stretches entirely across the screen. But with the viewport width and the initial scale, this is the initial scale. This is 1. If I want to develop here, this is my 1.0. This is my 100%. Now, this 100% doesn't change when the page is scrolled down. 100%, like maybe I'm developing for mobile first. Maybe I'm developing so that I expect people to load up my website on mobile first. That's where my main demographic is going to be. Initial scale doesn't change. This is our 100%. We're developing it. This viewport size is our 100%. We scale it up. You can see this number won't change, and you won't see it change anywhere, but it's scaling up to a larger size. This is probably about 5.0 or 1.5 or however scales it. We're just saying no matter what, start at 100%. So I'm going to remove this. So our next element is the title. So hovering over it again, The title element represents the document's title or name. Now, when I go, now that I'm live, you could see that I made a change. I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to add in NH1 again. This is a test heading. Okay, we don't care about this that I just put in. We actually care about what's in the tab here at the top. And you can see that it says document. Document is set because that's our title name. That's the title of our website. So now if I change it to test title, the title of the document changes. Now, again, this is really important, not only just because you want to have it set to your actual website, but their title has a lot of metadata with it, an incredible amount, where to the point of, even if I didn't own the domain, Ask a Toolmaker, even when I search for Ask a Toolmaker, you can see that this pops up. My thing still pops up as the second option, and it's because my title is like pretty much specifically what I'm looking for. You can see now that it's number 1. We're getting Reddit responses of ask me anything, I'm a toolmaker, interview questions. But the reason that we're the number 1 option is because our title is set to what we searched for. So if I search up YouTube, of course, I'm going to specifically get YouTube first. It doesn't matter what this domain would be. I would still get YouTube as the very first option because that is what my title is set to, or that's what their title is set to. So if this were a live website, no one's going to have the title of test title. Title tester. So you can see that we basically got the first option. It's not specifically what we want. So maybe if I search title tester, it'll be the first option. Of course, because that's the title of it. This is an important piece of metadata that you want to have related to your website and what people are going to likely be searching for.